That is why you would find a lot of people in the United States will say the war in Ukraine was in fact a U.S. war against Russia, using the Ukrainians. The purpose was to defeat the Russians, so that it's like they want to defeat the Chinese, to make sure there's no power in the world, as Wolfowitz said, who would challenge the interests of the U.S. During the Second World War, the Soviet Union lost 25 million people during that war, maybe 30 million. As you can see, this was an enormous sacrifice in the struggle to defeat Nazism. Of all of the countries that were involved in that war, the Soviet Union is the one that lost the greatest number of people. Therefore, there is a great sensitivity. The Soviet Union is no more, but talk now about the Russian Federation. A very great sensitivity about issues of war and peace. As they were building the EU, what became the EU, Churchill raised this matter and said, you Europeans were working on what, as I say, became the European Union. Be mindful of the fact that the security of the Soviet Union is very important because of the losses they suffered during the war. Now I'm mentioning that because at some point, as the Soviet Union was about to collapse, issue of the normalization of the relations between when Gorbachev was still at the head of government state in the Soviet Union, in its discussions with the West, with Reagan and others, question of relaxation of tensions between these two camps and so on arose. And in the end, one of the decisions that was taken was that there would be a unification of Germany, the two Germanys. And the commitment that was then made by the Western countries that Germany would remain part of NATO, but NATO troops would not go anywhere east. So that even if East Germany becomes part of Germany, you would not have NATO troops there. It relates to the matter about the sensitivity about the security question of the then Soviet Union. And that agreement between the East and West about the NATO borders not going anywhere further east, that matter changed. The question then arose, even in 2008, there was some NATO conference where a resolution was taken to say that even a country like Ukraine and Georgia, which shared borders with the Russian Federation, were perfectly at liberty to join NATO. Putin raised this matter in 2007 to say that the security of the Russian Federation was very important, and countries of the East and West must handle this matter, bearing in mind that there are security concerns of that kind. The Russian Federation are saying they would never ever agree that you would have NATO troops in Ukraine on their border. The Russian Federation offered all sorts of solutions to NATO, to the US, about how this matter could be handled. But there was an insistence on the NATO side that the Ukraine had every right to apply for membership of NATO. So you then end up with a situation where NATO troops would sit on the border of the Russian Federation. That's what caused the war. But that war had started not in 2022. It started in 2014, when the then democratically elected president of Ukraine was removed virtually by coup d'etat. You'd remember the the way the Western countries welcomed that change. That then the conflict broke out with the eastern provinces, what is the Donbass now, of Ukraine, refusing to accept that coup d'etat, that change of government. So the war started then. You would have seen the statements made by Angela Merkel and Francois Hollande 2 years back, where they said that, you remember there was negotiations at Minsk to resolve the conflict that was taking place in eastern Ukraine. And the Minsk agreement was agreed. Both Angela Merkel and Hollande said that actually that was, they did that in order to buy space for the government of Ukraine to arm itself. They're not genuine about that agreement. So in 2014, the NATO countries then pay attention to this matter of building up the military capacity of Ukraine. So in the eyes of the Russians, the reason you are building up the capacity, military capacity of Ukraine is to make sure that indeed you can then impose this thing about the membership of NATO. With a strong military Ukraine that can defend itself. So in the end, the Russian Federation felt that if the only way to stop that process, which would lead to Ukraine becoming a member of NATO and the placement of NATO troops on the border of Russia, was indeed to start the military operation in 2022. That is why around this whole discussion of this matter, this issue about multipolarity has arisen very sharply. Because it is about this issue. There's a matter that's not discussed very often here with regard to this issue. It is what is called in the US the Wolfowitz Doctrine. Paul Wolfowitz, a Republican, at some point he made a proposal. It was after the collapse of the Soviet Union, that the US should never allow that any country in the world should be so influential that it threatens any interest of the US. And the paper leaked that proposal. It was attacked even by the New York Times. This is too imperialist and all that. But that concept has never left US national security policy. That is why you would find a lot of people in the United States will say the war in Ukraine was in fact a US war against Russia, using the Ukrainians. The purpose was to defeat the Russians so that it's like they want to defeat the Chinese, to make sure there's no power in the world, as Wolfowitz said, who would challenge the interests of the US. I'm saying that is why you find the discussion about multipolarity. Now, our country takes a position that it is non-aligned. It's correct. It's a correct position. It's not aligned with Ukraine. It's not aligned with Russia on this matter. And they are saying there to be a peaceful resolution of this issue. And that resolution cannot avoid discussing this matter about a multipolar world. Because it lies at the heart of the conflict in Ukraine. The Russians would never ever agree that Ukraine should become a member of NATO. I am saying, bear in mind, these are people who lost 25, 30 million people during the Second World War. And I don't imagine NATO will want to change its position to say anybody who wants to apply for join to membership of NATO, they are free to do so. So in the end, I'm saying this conflict, in my view, is that this war in Ukraine can only be resolved, ended, in the context of a discussion about this multipolar issue. The positions taken by the South African government about non-alignment between the two belligerents is fine. It's correct. But in the end, the solution has got to be between the true belligerents. We support, I'm talking now about the ANC, we supported the proposal about a two-state solution with regard to Israel and the Palestine question. This was in support of a position that had been taken by the PLO as a representative of the people of Palestine. You would remember that there was a conference in Oslo some years back, which was between the Israelis and the Palestinians to discuss what to do about the conflict between the two of them. It's out of that conference that there was a decision, okay, let us then have a two-state solution. And as part of that process of forming a two-state solution, the establishment of the Palestinian Authority. We supported that proposal about the two-state solution because that was the proposal of the Palestinians themselves. We said we agree. We support your position on this. You remember we had, there was a proposal here for a two-state solution also here, which we refused. You remember they wanted, some of the Afrikaners wanted a folk state. So there must be formed a folk state somewhere in South Africa. So we have that state and then you have South Africa. We said no. In this case, when the Palestinians themselves said the two-state solution, we said we'll support you. Practically what has happened with regard to that is that, this thing that they talk about, facts on the ground. Effectively what has happened is that the possibility for the establishment of two states, I think, has ceased to exist. Because of the way the Israelis have handled this matter. If, for instance, you take the occupation, the settlements on the West Bank, practically the physical possibility for the establishment of two states, I think, has ceased to exist. And recently you saw what the Prime Minister Netanyahu has said, that in any case he is opposed to a two-state solution because you can't establish, he says, by definition, if you had a Palestinian state, sovereign and all that next door, it would be hostile to Israel. And as part of the reason, the approach towards this conflict in Gaza of the Israelis has been to, if we can chase away these Palestinians to go and live somewhere else, it'd be better. So that Gaza then becomes part of Israel. I think the possibility practically for a two-state solution at the moment is not possible. And yet we can't continue to allow the situation where the rights of the Palestinian people are disrespected. So we're stuck with a conundrum. You will have seen as the most recent decisions, for instance, of the International Court of Justice, where the International Court of Justice have said that these settlements, for instance, on the West Bank, are illegal. The occupation of what was Palestinian land post-1948 is illegal, according to the International Court of Justice. But the Israelis are completely ignoring whatever the ICJ says. We're stuck with a situation where the rights of the Palestinians are not being addressed, and the possibility to address them in the context of a two-state solution, I think, ceases to exist because of the behavior of the Israelis. So what is going to happen? I think we're in a situation of a conflict which won't end. And I think any attempt to persuade the Palestinians not to fight for their rights will fail. So the Palestinians will continue to fight for their rights. And I imagine Israelis will continue to talk about self-defense. So what is to be done? I don't know. I really honestly don't know. I think the Palestinian colleagues need to answer that question. One of the unfortunate things that has happened, it seems to me, you've had a virtual disappearance of the PLO. So, who speaks for the Palestinian people? That becomes a question. The People's Republic of China has just done a very, very good thing of convening all of the Palestinian factions in Beijing and saying to them, you must come together as a people and pursue. So there's an agreement among themselves, the Palestinians, reached in Beijing, that they will then come together and maybe reconstitute the PLO or whatever decision they take. Because at the moment, we don't have this one voice of the Palestinians to pose this question that you're posing to me, to say to them, what is your future? What do you say about yourselves? For many years, Gaddafi said he was against this two-state solution because he thought it'd never work. Let's have a one-state solution so that the Palestinians and the Israelis, everybody, the Jewish community and the Palestinians, they get together and live in one country as we live in one country. That proposal, of course, would be unacceptable to people like Netanyahu. We've seen the attempt to define Israel as a Jewish state. You've got Palestinians who are Israelis, but they want to attach this particular description to Israel. If they can, as Netanyahu is saying, if we can chase away all of these Arabs in Gaza and in West Bank and take over these territories, that will be his solution. Hopefully, the Palestinian leadership will tell us what it is that needs to be done in this situation. Because the answer to that question is not very easy. And as I've said, Netanyahu has said, in any case, over his dead body, there will be no two-state solution. And as far as I know, we are not about to withdraw from the ICC. The position I think that we've taken, which was that we should act on the matter of the ICC together with the rest of the African Union. And what the African Union was about was not withdrawing from the ICC, but changing various parts of the Rome Statute. And I think that is the South African position. The matter about the gender issue is correctly raised. Some time back, I was asked to speak at the University of Venda on this question. And the central point I tried to make there was, there's a critical matter that we face as a government, and I think as a country, which is called gender mainstreaming. That to deal correctly in a manner that's going to produce the results that we need, we have to engage in this gender mainstreaming. I give you a simple example. Because I was talking at a university, I used a university example. Take women lecturers. Because they are women, they get pregnant and give birth to children. So during this impacts their capacity. At some point, you got to take maternity leave. It's not binding on the men to take paternity leave, but it's binding on the women to take paternity leave. And in many cases, impacts on their possibilities for promotion. Impacts negatively on that. So one university in the United States says, as part of the response, they will establish a creche, a kindergarten, on the grounds of the university, so that this woman lecturer who's given birth to a child does not have to drive home for breastfeeding, and they are losing time, but they must breastfeed at the university. I'm saying it's with particular intervention to say, mainstream the issue of women's empowerment within everything that you do. The Vice Chancellor of UNISA is sitting with us here. I don't know if this university is mainstreaming the gender question. I think it's a critically important part so that you can say, with regard to anything and everything that you do, take the question of leadership that you are raising. A part of our experience here has been, if you take elections, there's a lot of resistance on the part of the population to elect women to be their representatives. That's why the matter of quotas becomes important. For instance, in our own system here, fortunately, we've got this proportional representation system. So an organization can then say 50% of our candidates will be women. And it becomes possible then to have whatever number you get elected, 50% of whoever is elected are women. But if you had a different system, let us say you had a constituency system, first past the post and all of that, you would probably find that where you have women candidates standing for this particular constituency, that constituency, the likelihood of getting to that 50% will be very difficult. You need to look just at local government elections, where you have ward systems, ward representatives. I'm quite certain if you look at who are these councillors who get elected on the ward system, is majority men. You compensate it by using the proportional representation system by saying then on the proportional side, we'll put women candidates. So I'm back at my gender mainstreaming. Therefore, that when we do anything and everything that we do, we should say, what is the gender policy with regard to whatever it is that we're trying to do? I think this is the only way to deal with this issue. The fact that you would have a woman elected as president or whatever doesn't mean necessarily that you are addressing the gender issue. This woman might indeed be president or whatever, but the condition of the woman doesn't change. The provision of clean water. I was born in the rural areas and grew up in the rural areas. There was no clean water with a tap. You had to fetch water from the river. So in our area there, some of the water would be fair. You'd get a drum and then put it on a sleigh and get cattle to drag the sledge. But in many instances, you have women with buckets on the head. So when you say, let's solve this water problem, the piped water within 50 meters of every home, whatever, you make a very, very big impact on women. To take away the responsibility from women to be carrying water from the river. it might be more important than many other interventions you make. That also relates to firewood, the fetching of firewood, which in many rural areas was a women's issue. Where you say, well, let's supply electricity must be available, you are addressing this issue of taking particular burdens of women. That's a process of the empowerment of women. I'm saying that's part of the gender mainstreaming. What we need to educate South Africa about, if we're addressing the matter about emancipation of women, equality, and all of that, let indeed be, I'm saying mainstream this issue. Not an additional, this is our policy, but in addition to this, no. I've been saying to people that this country, for some reason, is exceedingly violent. Exceedingly violent. The levels of violence in this country against the person are too high. If you look at particular age cohort, I think maybe up to the 29 years or something, you'd find that the biggest cause of death is unnatural causes, violence. And so if you take a particular age cohort like that, you'd find the number of young men who get killed is intolerably high. Within that group, you then find women being killed intolerably high. We must indeed address this matter about gender-based violence. But we must also address the matter of violence to create the social context within which you can more effectively address the question of gender-based violence. You can't hope to produce the kind of outcome that we need to have if you don't deal with the rest of the violence in the society. Gender-based violence must be addressed within the context of addressing the violence in society as a whole. How do we do it? I don't know. The very first judgment of the Constitutional Court, you'd recall, was a judgment which prohibited capital punishment. A very important judgment in my view, because it argued this new South Africa that is being born must have as one of its big values respect for life. So that even the state has no right to take away the life of anybody. Respect for life as a distinguishing feature of the new South Africa. In the practice, the opposite is true. What do we do as a society to change the public mind so that indeed we support the position that was taken by the Constitutional Court about the value of human life, the violence in the society, in the context of which you have this gender-based violence? What do we do? Just last week or something, the police were giving the crime statistics for whatever quarter. And they talk about the murder, causes of murder. And the first one is quarrels. The cause of murder. Number one is quarrels. People quarreled and killed one another. What kind of society is that? But are we discussing that as South Africans to say, how do we stop this? There's no such discussion. So that problem is not going to be solved. I really think that the strategic decision has to be about this gender mainstreaming. When we're discussing what kind of South Africa do we want, one of the issues that became a big issue of discussion in the movement, in the ANC I'm talking about, was this provision in the Freedom Charter which says, the people shall govern. How do you express that? How do you give effect to that vision, the people shall govern? That is why you have the current system of local government. Because the view was, the sphere of government closest to the people is local government. It is at that level that you must give expression to the notion the people shall govern. And you know all of these things that were decided. That I, as a candidate councillor standing in a ward, I must have an IDP, a development program for my ward, which I discuss with the people in the ward, so that the population intervenes in governing itself. It even says that actively the municipal government must encourage NGOs to participate in this thing. Civil society must feel engaged in this process of the people shall govern. I'm mentioning this because this was a primary area during the period you're talking about. This is a primary issue to which we focused. Let's construct a system of government which gives effect to this notion, the people shall govern. Where shall we do it? Let's do it at the municipal level. As you and I know, it's not working. Part of the reason is that we made a mistake. Again, I'm talking about the ANC. Now, as you know, we may know this. The ANC has got a leadership school, a political school, or Thabo school, to train in leadership and all of that. And modules, and you finish modules, you get a certificate and so on. So the local government elections take place in 2021. And each of the municipalities where we win is asked, the people are asked to supply a short list of 3 people from whom a panel will choose. We'll choose one to address a leadership issue at that level. So I'm in that short list. And one of the things I say about myself, my CV, is I finished 6 modules at the Oliver Tambo School. Which means I'm a well-trained cadre. And then the panel starts asking me questions, which are in those modules. And I can't answer them. And the reason is because what I do, I ask Puleng Lengabul to become Thabo Mbeki, to do these 6 courses. She does them and she passes in my name. And I pay 5,000 rand. I'm telling you practically what's happening. So that when Thabo Mbeki appears before the panel, he's got a certificate of qualification. But he can't answer the questions that were discussed in the modules, because it's Puleng who did the course. This is part of the political leadership at the municipalities is a serious problem. And from that flows all manner of things. Why are so many of these municipalities getting these negative Auditor General reports? There was one minister of Kokta who I wasn't there, but I'm told he said at an NEC meeting that in reality the funds transferred from the central fiscus to local government can do a lot to address its challenges of service delivery. The problem, he said, I was sitting in a meeting of the NEC, he said, the problem is this money that's allocated to this municipality. Some of it disappears into the pockets of my comrades who are sitting in this meeting. It disappears into pockets of people who are in provincial government. By the time it gets to local government, it's a fraction of what was originally voted. These are some of the practical matters that have got to be addressed with regard to changes in local government. But in terms of ending the apartheid system of spatial distribution of population, I'm saying that is very critically part of the issue of what we do with regard to the restructuring of this economy. With regard to the question raised about Eswatini, at the time that there were the big demonstrations in Eswatini and that included burning of shops and so on, at that time, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I contacted His Majesty King Mswati, basically to say to him what is to be done in the light of that situation. In the context of that discussion, I said to him that I wanted to engage the people, the population, Eswatini, to find out from them what is the problem, how to solve it. So what happened was that we then constituted a team which spoke to everybody, Eswatini, Pudemo, the EFF of Eswatini, the Communist Party of Eswatini, the trade unions, the traditional leaders, even the government, to discuss that question. What's the problem? What's the solution? Everybody responded. We put a report together about all of that. And as I had said to His Majesty that I'd really want to listen to the population, Maswati, to hear from them what they think about their country and its future in order to come back to him. We prepared the report. I went to Eswatini to meet His Majesty, carrying the report, to engage him. Unfortunately, he felt very sick while we were there. He got very sick. And then he was, I believe him, he actually got sick. I left the report, and then, to cut a long story short, I saw him quite recently to say to him there is this outstanding meeting between him and me, because I still owe him that report. So he has agreed. So that's the next going to happen. I'm saying this to say we are doing this thing from the position of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. Indeed, very conscious of the role that Amaswati played in our own liberation. As you know, I spent some time in Eswatini as part of our struggle. And I said this publicly, that our best defender was the late King Sobhuza. Really defended us against this regime, the apartheid regime. So very, very conscious of the role that Amaswati played in terms of our struggle, and conscious of the challenges that the country faces. That is our own intervention. The government side has intervened on the matter of Eswatini. There are some bilateral agreements, but mainly through SADC. I don't want to talk about that, but clearly that SADC intervention has not taken us anywhere. From my point of view and the point of view of our foundation, I've agreed with His Majesty, King Mswati, that we need to have this meeting that we had agreed, so that I can then give him a complete report of what the people of Eswatini have said to us about what the problem is and what their proposal is about how the matter should be solved. So we are not by any means, as you can say, ignoring Eswatini. It's a very practical matter. And as I say that when we constituted our team, we said to them they need to talk to everybody, including the cabinet. Fortunately, the Prime Minister then, not the current one, agreed to that, and indeed we met with the cabinet talk to the staff, His Majesty's own staff. So it's a comprehensive report, and I'm hoping that when we do engage with His Majesty, that will produce some movement. I'm hoping that would be. It will encourage His Majesty to respond positively to what His own people have said to us. And certainly, therefore, we will not, under any circumstances, forget about Eswatini. So that's a practical intervention that we've made, and I'm saying again, I'm hoping that it will produce the necessary results. With regard to the DRC, we've been engaged with the matter of the DRC for many years now. When the old man Laurent Kabila was leading people marching towards Kinshasa, 1997, both Kabila and Mobutu sent a message to Nelson Mandela to say, please intervene. That's what led to that meeting, that famous meeting which took place on a boat at Pointe-Noire in Congo-Brazzaville. That was the first intervention. And this country has then made various interventions on this matter, trying to help to find a peaceful resolution to all of the conflicts in the Congo. I can mention all of them, but that would take time, but I'm saying all of them. You remember when, after Laurent Kabila had taken over as president of the Congo, he quarreled with the people who had supported him in the neighborhood, particularly Rwanda. A war broke out. We tried to stop it, but couldn't. In the end, the following year, or 1999 or thereabouts, in the end, the belligerents met in Lusaka and concluded the Lusaka Agreement, which ended that war. The document that was negotiated there was drafted here. We're not belligerents. We attended that meeting as observers. But because of our engagement with the Congolese matter, I'm saying we drafted the document, which became the base document, which was then negotiated in Lusaka. Even the matter that was raised about the neighborhood, after that Lusaka agreement was signed by all the belligerents, including Rwanda, Uganda, DRC, and so on, it was clear that we needed another document to discuss the relations between the DRC and Rwanda. And again, we hosted negotiations between those two countries, and they signed an agreement, 2004 or something. As a result of which the Congo, the DRC, the Rwandans agreed to pull out their troops, which were in the DRC, and the Congolese government under Joseph Kabila undertook then to disarm the Interamwe and so on, which were in the Congo, and so on. That agreement was not properly implemented. This is my personal view. First of all, the conflict in the Eastern Congo cannot be solved by military means. Can't be. It doesn't matter how many soldiers you put in there, it's not going to be solved by military means. That conflict can only be solved through a process of negotiation involving the population, the entirety of the population in the Eastern Congo, as well as the neighboring countries, particularly Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi. So we need a process like that. And it seems to me that the country best placed to handle that process is this one, South Africa, because of its history of involvement with the Congolese. It's got the necessary standing, it's got the necessary credibility, and it's got all of that. And that all of us, the region, the government of the Congo, must come to this conclusion together. There can be no military solution. Therefore, there's got to be a negotiated political solution. And South Africa, please lead us. That's my suggestion. And I think it would work. SADC has deployed troops there. And the mandate is to assist the government of the DRC to establish peace and security in the Eastern Congo. That's the formal mandate of the SADC group. That's why they send soldiers. It doesn't need soldiers. Peace and security in the Eastern Congo will come about not because of guns, but will become of a political intervention. I think the South African government is the one best placed to facilitate a process like that. The issue in the Eastern Congo is very complex. People only talk about the M23 and don't even relate the M23 to Rwanda. They don't relate the M23 to the Banyamulenge in the Eastern Congo. Raise questions about the Mai Mai in the Eastern Congo. Raise questions about other groups like in Bunya and all that. It's a very complex situation. There are many contesting groups in the Eastern Congo, in the Kivus. Somebody must intervene and bring all of them together and then say, let's sit together and solve this problem. My view is that South Africa would be the best place to facilitate those negotiations. Whether they would agree to all of that, I don't know. But there's no other solution. Angola is quite right to be concerned about the matter. The East African community is correct to be concerned about the matter. The UN is correct to be sure, all of those people. But I think all of them, let's all of them get together and agree. We've tried many things. They haven't worked. Let's try this one of a peaceful solution. And I hope that would help us to produce the result that we want. I have raised this matter with some people concerned to say, let's act. So I'm not only telling you about it, it must result in practical action. Otherwise, that conflict in the Eastern Congo won't be solved. Currently, there's a discussion going on, there's a process going on the continent to prepare for the election of the new commission of the African Union next year, in February. And as you know, part of what the AU decided was that this position of chairperson of the commission should rotate among the regions, African regions. And so the region delegated the task to nominate the next chair candidate is East Africa. What I would have expected is that the East African region would get together and say, who among us from East Africa would be the best candidate for this position of chairperson of the AU Commission? They haven't done that. Instead, you have candidates from Tanzania, from Djibouti, from Kenya, from Somalia, from Mauritius. 5 candidates from East Africa. Now you send all of these 5 names to the AU must decide which one. It's an incorrect approach because there are many deficiencies with the current Commission of the African Union. And yet that Commission has got a vital task in addressing exactly these matters that you raise about good governance on the continent. The African Union, we have a whole multiplicity, I keep raising this thing, of policies. The economy of the continent, the politics of the continent, war and peace, the gender question, women's, children's rights. There are policy positions of the African Union on all of these things. But there's no leadership to make sure that these policies are implemented, and that leadership should reside in that commission. So the election of a new chairperson of the Commission is a matter of vital importance for the future of the continent. But the East African region is not giving us any candidate, except a fleet of 5 candidates. You can't just pop up and say, my name is Thabo Mbeki, I want to be chair. Why? Why must we elect you? I'm saying the very process of the election, we were raising issues about that. That these candidates, there needs to be a particular process, transparent. All of Africa can see it. Ask them about the policies of the AU. What do they know? The practices and rules and regulations and all that. So that by the time you say, we hereby elect you as chairperson, you are confident that you are electing somebody who's actually going to do this practical work of making sure that the continent implements the decisions it's taken. You see what is happening in West Africa. A coup takes place in Niger. They remove whoever was president. ECOWAS decides to act against them, including up to the point of even a military intervention. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But because of the way the matter was handled, you've now got 3 countries that have walked out of ECOWAS. It has weakened that regional body. Somebody was telling me the other day that Guinea-Conakry is going to join them. But I'm saying, here's the AU. The AU has got a very important committee called the Committee of the Panel of the Wise. They ought to have seen this thing to say there's problems coming here. How do we intervene? There's no intervention. And those soldiers are raising a very important point. Apart from carrying out coups, they are raising an important point. To end the neo-colonial relationship between France and these African countries. Immediate task we have is the reconstitution of the Commission of the African Union in 3-4 months' time to make sure that it provides the kind of leadership that is required. I see the ambassador here of Western Sahara. Welcome. The matter, that important matter of the admission of Morocco into the AU, that raised very important questions about the issue of Western Sahara. That issue remains unresolved. Somebody sent me some video footage just 3-4 days ago of a conference in Japan. And there you have the Japanese envoy beating up physically the representative of the Western Sahara. But I'm saying there's an issue. I saw one of the African countries have now opened a consulate in this territory, which is illegally occupied by Morocco. And the African Union is nowhere to be seen, despite its own policy positions on this matter. That's why this matter about who constitutes the leadership in the Commission of the AU next year becomes of critical importance. At its conferences in 2012, 2017, 2022, the ANC took a decision, one decision for the renewal of the ANC. 3 successive conferences, renewal, renewal, renewal. It hasn't happened. You will see that in all of these conferences of the ANC I'm talking about, the ANC does a critical assessment of itself. It's in the ANC documents. You will find them on the internet. And in all of these conferences, the ANC keeps saying the quality of our membership is declining. As a result of which, you've got many people who are members of the ANC who are not ANC. Don't support his value system, his objectives, his anything. And therefore, the renewal process of the ANC must include an audit of this membership. Who are these people who call themselves ANC? I'm raising that question because you can't deal with the corruption issue without that process. I'm talking about from the point of view of the ANC. An ANC not renewed is an ANC that will continue to carry corrupt people. So the renewal process becomes a critically important part of the process of ensuring that we deal with this issue of corruption. So that's a matter that fortunately, is very much alive currently. And indeed, the National Executive Committee of the ANC actually took a decision 2 weeks back that it would actually sit for 2 days continuously to discuss this issue. What is to be done? I think everybody has understood that if you don't deal with this renewal of the ANC, you are sentencing the ANC to death. It will die without that renewal. I'm saying that's the route to deal with the corruption issue. It's not just a law matter. Arrest whoever is corrupt. Sure, let's arrest whoever is corrupt. But we need this political intervention. People who ought not to be wearing ANC T-shirts must not be allowed to wear ANC T-shirts. You know, the ANC took a decision about people stepping aside. If you are charged, step aside. And I tell a story of some years back, an ANC comrade who is a member of the Provincial Executive Committee of the ANC in the Free State, is also an MEC in the Free State, is also a taxi owner. So a story appears that he has been involved in these taxi wars in the Free State, and people have died. You know what this comrade did? He approached the ANC in the province, and even informed National, to say, I'm resigning as member of the PEC, of the ANC in the Free State. I'm resigning as MEC. I have not killed anybody. I will defend the matter in court. Which he did and was found not guilty. And he was saying, the mere fact that there's a popular view that I'm a murderer, it tarnishes the image of the ANC. And therefore, I must leave. So I give that example to say, he never said, I have not been charged. That's a genuine ANC member. Anyone who says, I'll only step aside when I'm charged, you must know they're not ANC members. So I'm just saying that matter is very core to the dealing with this issue of corruption about the government of national unity. But I mean, the ANC leadership engaged all of this, but shared the view that since we've got 40% of the votes, therefore I haven't got a majority to govern, let's approach all of the parties, let all of us come together and form a government of national unity and govern. And in the end, you have these 10 parties that constitute that. And we want the country to succeed, the economy to grow, crime to disappear, all of these things. And so we wish the government of national unity to succeed. I hope all of the parties in that GNU are of that same mind, that the problems challenging the facing the country need to be solved.
I'm a king, yes, I'm a king. I'm a king.